When you study the Second World War from the comfort of a desk, it's easy to assume armies functioned in clean lines, standard issue equipment, strict rules and uniform discipline. But, once you dig into first-hand accounts, you learn the truth. Soldiers carried what worked, not what the manual approved. Across every front of the war, men filled their packs with banned, improvised and unofficial gear that often made the difference between coping and failing, or in some cases, living and dying. This isn't the glamorous side of history. It's the practical, quiet reality of warfare. The small decisions made by exhausted men trying to survive another day. Let's break down the items that were technically prohibited, strongly discouraged, or at least not recommended, yet became essential tools on battlefields from North Africa to the Pacific. The first category is unofficial blades. Most armies issued bayonets or small field knives, but many soldiers found them inadequate. American GIs often carried civilian hunting knives mailed from home, and British Tommies sharpened unauthorized trench knives fashioned by local blacksmiths or unit tinkerers. Commanders hated these weapons because they weren't standardized, and in some cases violated the Geneva Convention's vague rules on barbed or cruel blades. But when you're digging out a machine gun nest in Italy or cutting signal wire under fire, you use the tool that works. Official kit simply wasn't built for the abuse infantryman put it through. Even today, many of these improvised knives show wear patterns that tell their own story. Bent tips, cracked handles, and heavy sharpening marks from months in the field. The second item, almost universal and absolutely unofficial, was alcohol. Not the ceremonial ration, not the officer's bottle. This was contraband liquor, traded, stolen, or improvised. American troops in France fermented apple mash behind barns. German troops in Russia brewed a crude potato spirit. And Japanese soldiers commonly produced makeshift alcohol from rice or fermented fruit. Military command saw the danger. Alcohol compromised discipline, slowed reaction time, and caused dehydration. But for soldiers living in constant cold, mud and artillery shock, a few ounces of warmth was worth the reprimand. And it wasn't only for morale. Alcohol was used as a disinfectant, a fire accelerant, and in some cases cleaning fluid for frozen gun parts. The rulebooks didn't approve it, but the frontline conditions didn't care. Next were unofficial medical supplies, the kind soldiers carried because the standard-issue options were laughably inadequate. Morphine syrettes were controlled tightly. So many men carried aspirin, civilian pain tablets, and even powdered sulfur looted from aid stations. Soviet soldiers frequently carried homemade tourniquets and strips of cloth soaked in antiseptics because official bandages were in short supply. German soldiers on the retreat used folded cigarette papers as temporary gauze. Military policy discouraged private medical gear because misusing it could worsen wounds or interfere with triage. But when a medic was half a mile away and mortars were falling, immediate self-care mattered more than regulations. Veterans described these small items as the difference between panic and control. A fourth category was unauthorized winter gear. On the Eastern Front, German troops famously suffered because of poor winter preparations. Many solved this by, stealing or trading for Soviet fur caps, civilian mittens, or local sheepskin coats. Items strictly forbidden because they broke uniform standards and could cause friendly fire mistakes. But the cold didn't respect the dress code. Soldiers learned quickly that violating regulations meant survival. American troops in the Ardennes did the same, stuffing newspapers into jackets or wearing civilian socks sent from home. Allied quartermasters complained constantly about these breaches, but the soldiers weren't trying to rebel. They were trying to keep their fingers. Fifth on the list is unauthorized food. Rations were standardized to ensure consistent nutrition and ease of transport, but everyone knew they ranged from unreliable to nearly inedible. Soldiers scavenged, traded, or outright smuggled local food: bread, cheese, dried fish, anything with calories. French wine cellars were raided so frequently American commanders issued direct warnings. Japanese soldiers in the Pacific relied heavily on local forage because their supply chain collapsed. The issue wasn't merely morale. Soldiers needed real calories. Even the best rations, like the American sea ration, often caused digestive problems when eaten for weeks. The worst rations, Italy's, Japan's, and late-war Germany's, practically drove soldiers to ignore the rules entirely. Another essential but technically forbidden item was personal fire-starting material. Many armies prohibited matches, homemade candles, or improvised stoves because the light and smoke risked detection. Yet, soldiers still carried them because a hot drink at 3 a.m. in a frozen trench could restore focus and discipline. German troops in Russia made stoves from ration tins. American GIs heated coffee over hexamine tablet contraptions they weren't supposed to have. And British commandos used waterproof matches carried in tiny tins that inspectors regularly confiscated, but somehow always reappeared. Practicality always won. Finally, the most psychologically important unauthorized gear: letters, souvenirs, and charms. These were banned not because they were dangerous, but because losing them could compromise unit secrecy or morale. Some units forbade photographs entirely. Others discouraged talismans because they encouraged superstition. But soldiers are human. They carried reminders of home, fragments of identity, and objects that grounded them in an environment designed to strip humanity away. These weren't useless items. They were anchors. What ties all of this together is the fundamental conflict between regulation and reality. Armies need rules to function, but soldiers need tools to survive. On paper, unauthorized gear weakens discipline. On the battlefield, it often strengthens resilience. It's an uncomfortable truth militaries rarely admit openly, but it's evident in every memoir, footlocker, and recovered kit from the Second World War. If you want more deep dives into the real, unfiltered side of wartime history, make sure to subscribe, share the video, and stick around for the next episode.